Hello and welcome to this week's video blog. Last week, a local cyclist was ticketed for speeding in a school zone. The event attracted a lot of attention on the news and a lot of heated discussion on social media. In this week's blog, we'll discuss how BC's Motor Vehicle Act applies to cyclists and why. To start, Section 119 of BC's Motor Vehicle Act defines a cycle as a device having any number of wheels that is propelled by human power and on which a person may ride, and includes a motor-assisted cycle, but does not include a skateboard, roller skates, or inline roller skates. Then, importantly, Section 183 of the Motor Vehicle Act goes on to state, in addition to the duties imposed by this section, a person operating a cycle on a highway has the same rights and duties as a driver of a vehicle. In other words, the rights and duties under BC's motor vehicle law that relate to cars apply to bicycles as well. This means the same laws that govern how fast motor vehicles can travel, the manner in which they enter and leave roadways, and how they negotiate intersections and interact with each other apply to bicycles as well. This may seem strange to some cyclists because bicycles, of course, have less weight, often travel slower, and are most of the time more maneuverable than motor vehicles. However, many believe this law is sensible. Let me give you an example. When a bicycle is traveling straight through an intersection and has the right of way, they would expect a car traveling towards them that is turning left to give the cyclist the right of way, that is, not to cut the cyclist off. This example demonstrates how the law that governs cyclists actually protects the rights of cyclists. However, for safety reasons, it puts responsibilities on them as well. It may seem obvious that, because of the simple physics of mass times velocity, a vehicle can cause more damage to a cyclist than a cyclist to a pedestrian. But that comparison bears little comfort for a pedestrian who suffered a brain injury because they've been knocked to the ground by a careless cyclist. In other words, an object traveling at speed does not need to weigh even a fraction of what a vehicle does in order to cause significant injury. Section 83 of the Act provides for pedestrians the same increase in safety from being injured by bicyclists as it provides cyclists from being injured by motorists. What many people overlook in this debate is that while every person, including a cyclist or pedestrian, injured by a motor vehicle in BC will have some form of insurance coverage to help pay for medical expenses and wage loss while they're injured, the same is sadly not true of a pedestrian injured by a cyclist. In other words, ICBC and private automobile insurers will not pay for the medical expenses or wage loss of a pedestrian injured by a cyclist. It is only if the cyclist has liability insurance through their home or renter's insurance that they will have some source of money to help pay for the injured person's expenses. If that insurance is not available, the cyclist will be personally responsible to pay for the injured person's expenses. Often this can mean personal bankruptcy for the cyclist, as many injuries result in hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. Both the injured pedestrian and the cyclist are the ultimate losers in that scenario. Imagine for a moment a cyclist speeding through a school zone, glancing down to inspect their gears or looking sideways at something unusual and colliding with a small child who's crossing the road, leaving the child with a brain injury. The cyclist would likely have no insurance and the child would be left with minimal resources to pay for medical care and income loss throughout its life. In short, there's a good reason the safety precautions set out in the Motor Vehicle Act apply to bicycles as well as motor vehicles. They are to reduce the risk to others that might be caused by bicycles in the same way that motor vehicles might cause injury to cyclists. In closing, I reviewed one blog in the last few days that questioned whether a cyclist should be ticketed for speeding when bicycles don't have speedometers and therefore cannot gauge their speed. This raises an interesting issue that we'll cover in more detail in a future video blog, but for the time being, it'll suffice to say that cyclists should always err on the side of caution if they're unable to reasonably judge their speed. Thank you for watching.